I can hold in my two hands everything I need to send a message all the way around the world and back to myself. 5 watts and a wire. This radio fits in the palm of my hand, and with less power than you get from a car headlight, it can make contacts all the way around the world. And why should I care about any of that? My phone can do all those things, your phone can do all those things. I mean, all of that's accessible to anybody these days. So why does any of this matter? Why am I doing this obsolete hobby? It extends our senses to places that we otherwise wouldn't even know existed. I mean, really, isn't it just like glorified walkie-talkies? Like, seriously, why am I making such a big deal out of this? Why do you make such a big deal out of this? Because half of you watching this video are into ham radio. That's why you're watching it in the first place. There's just so much to it. And it comes down to that basic level human desire to communicate, to reach out to others. And maybe that's one of the most important points about this, is that it's all about reaching out to another person, seeing if another person is there, and seeing if there's another person out there who's as crazy about this medium as you are. I mean, yeah, it pretty much is walkie-talkies, except not really, because these are two-way radios that can use the ionosphere. What's the ionosphere, you say? The ionosphere is a layer of charged particles, or ionized particles, if you will, that is sitting over our head. It is created when the sun hits our atmosphere. So if this is the surface of the Earth, sitting over the surface of the Earth a few miles is a layer of ionized particles sitting over the surface of the Earth, and they're created by the solar wind. So those particles have a neat property. Say that I have an antenna right here and I've got an antenna right here, and these antennas are emitting radio waves, but as you can see, the radio waves are hitting the ground. How sad. These two stations cannot communicate with each other. But if they're using just the right frequencies, what we call the HF frequencies, between 0 and 30 megahertz, if conditions are just right, some of those radio waves that go up into the sky will refract through the ionosphere and they'll come back down to this other station. And so that means that there could be like over 1,000 miles between these two stations. They can hear each other. But the fun part is that the only people that can hear each of these stations are each other, and then of course the people in the line of sight zone to these stations, which means if there was another station right here, they would just be sitting there just not hearing anything, because they're in what is oftentimes referred to as the skip zone. The other cool thing that can happen with the ionosphere is that it can skip multiple times, especially over salt water, which is why I communicate with Japan so frequently. That means that it can hop, 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 and keep on hopping all the way around the planet until it comes back to his sender. That's very uncommon, but it does happen, and in fact, it has happened to me before. If you have just the right conditions and you're in a quiet enough place, you can work yourself long path. That's what we call it. There's your short explanation of the ionosphere. So the farthest contact I made today was in Japan, all the way across the Pacific. It's almost 5,000 miles. And it's actually not all that uncommon. Like sometimes I'll get New Zealand, I've gotten Australia before, even China. And that's just with 10 watts and a wire. 10 watts of power, that's all this power, that's all this little radio puts out, is 10 watts and a wire. And I can get all the way, I can verify that my signal was heard by somebody 5,000 miles away. They heard me, we had a two-way exchange, and we verified it. That's what's so fascinating about amateur radio, is that we can use radio frequencies that take our ideas, our thoughts, our messages over the horizon. It's a way of having hands-on experience with moving our thoughts through this medium of magic that we call radio. The frequencies that we use have different personalities. They behave in certain ways that make people kind of interact with them like they're almost a living thing. We know that frequencies that are lower, and we measure the frequencies by their actual wavelength, by the distance that light can travel in one wavelength over a certain number of seconds. So frequencies around 7 megahertz are referred to as 40 meters. Frequencies around 3.5 megahertz are called 80 meters. And those frequencies, they work really well within like a 500-mile radius. They reflect off the sky, and people within 500 miles over the horizon can hear you. And then there's frequencies we call like 20 meters. The 20-meter band is at 14 megahertz, and 20 meters works in line of sight, then skips over the people just immediately over the horizon, and then people about 900 to 1,000 miles can hear you as it refracts through the ionosphere and then bounces back to the ground. And then there were these special frequencies, like what we call the 10-meter band, around 30 megahertz. And those frequencies are only open on a 6-year cycle, on the sun cycle. So when we're at the top of the sun cycle and there's a lot of solar radiation hitting our ionosphere, there's times that on 10 meters, that's when I've heard my own signal come back to me. That's when that band has been so wide open, so refractive, that my signal went around the earth and came back to my radio. And that was with only 10 watts. But it doesn't happen all the time. And that's the real magic of this, is that it doesn't always work. It's like fishing. Sometimes the conditions are good, sometimes the conditions are bad, and it's not really readily predictable which one it's going to be. You don't always know what you're going to get when you go out. It's still always just kind of a roll of the dice before you get out here, before you set up all your gear, of discovering, is this even going to work?
Like, all right, that's good, it works, and everybody here sounds great.
It's something remarkable to hear what happens to a human voice when it gets turned into radio waves and it goes into the sky and then it hits those charged particles and it distorts and it changes and it comes back to you, and to hear what that does. That is the extension of your senses to an otherwise unseen world. That's just a little piece of the magic of radio. So if radio waves can bounce off the ionosphere and travel all the way around the world, then why aren't you seeing television stations from other countries on your digital TV? Well, it turns out only certain radio waves do that, and it's at certain frequencies. Those are the frequencies we call HF, which literally stands for high frequency, because the people who invented radio were very smart, but they also didn't get clever where they didn't need to. We radio nerds also play around with the higher frequencies. Today on this summit, I'm messing around with VHF, very high frequency. And this is an antenna for the 2-meter band. And the difference between 2 meters and those lower HF frequencies, this frequency will not propagate through the ionosphere. It's a high enough frequency that it just punches right through the ionosphere. But it does do a couple of cool things. One of the things it'll do is tropospheric ducting, where if there's certain layers within the atmosphere based on what the weather is doing, it can actually travel for like hundreds and hundreds of miles through the troposphere, like it's a duct, like it ducts through the troposphere. And then the other cool thing you can do with it is you can bounce it off of different landforms. So like if you've got high mountains between you and somebody in another city, and you can both see that mountain, if you have enough power and they have enough sensitivity, then you guys can have a two-way conversation that way by bouncing your signals off of the mountains. And the other thing that you can do, I've done before, is you can actually, when there are northern lights out, when the aurora are visible, you can bounce signals off of the aurora. And I have had Morse code conversations with people bouncing their signals off of the aurora. Now you can only do it in Morse code because the aurora distorts the signal so much, because it's basically hitting different curtains of ionized gas at different places. And so it's this very white noise, like. That you can tell something's there, but you can do it. There's UHF. UHF is ultra high frequency, and those are even higher up, and they have different behaviors and they do different things. And we can use all the modes on these frequencies. So I can use Morse code on the VHF antenna that I've got here that is, right now you can't tell, but it's pointed at Portland. The orientation antenna, what we call polarization, and it's exactly the same phenomenon as polarized light, because it is light, it's electromagnetic waves. Anyway, these are subject to that same phenomenon. So if people's antennas aren't polarized the same way, so if they're not turned the same way, then there's actually a loss between those two different antennas, which I might talk about in a different video. I don't even know if I'll talk about it, but there we go. So if I can make it flat and it's a horizontally polarized antenna, and then I can go back to vertical and it's vertically polarized, and we try to all be polarized the same direction. Just the fact that the concept of polarization is relevant here, and it's the same exact phenomenon that's going on with your polarized sunglasses when you use them to cut glare. Another reason it's just so fascinating to me. And I can't think of any better place to end this happy little rant than right here in my ham shack, just to point out that This is a hobby for people who love to tinker. This is a hobby for people who just love to build things and who love to constantly be learning new things, because that has been one of the most exciting things for me, and I think it's the most exciting thing that I hear from anybody who's involved in this hobby, is that no matter where you are at in your ham radio journey, no matter what you're doing, where your interest level is, whether you just took the test and got your technician, or whether you've been doing this for years and you're buying like your 10th radio, or you're building your 10th radio, you're always learning something. This hobby is always pushing you to learn something new. In my case, it's like, I would never have guessed getting into this that I would learn 3D design. I would never have guessed getting into this that somehow I would be compelled to be making my own 3D prints and learning how to design stuff in Fusion, like a really pretty complicated, sophisticated 3D design program, just because I wanted to make antennas that were different than what I could buy, because nobody can possibly sell you exactly what you want in this hobby. And because of that, you're going to find yourself learning how to build or how to find things that make what you want possible. The thing that makes this hobby amazing is that you can't always buy what you want. And because of that, you will learn what you need to learn in order to get what you want. And when you are forced to solve problems to get your desires met, that's when you know you're truly learning something. And so it's not just about the radio. It's not just about making contacts with each other. It's really about the excuse to create things, the excuse to challenge yourself to do new things. And you will meet some amazing people. I have met some of the most incredible people just doing this hobby. You can't help it. You are going to run into people who have incredible ambitions, incredible experiences, and ideas to share with you. And you will likely find a very enthusiastic, friendly, welcome, and open community. And ham radio has been around for over 100 years. And in that 100 years, the community has become deep and wide, and it has its own culture, its own history, its own lore. And there's just so much to do and interact with here. And so in a cold, soulless universe that is indifferent to our existence, we have built a community around using the properties of that universe in order to allow us to communicate and connect to each other. And this isn't just a technical hobby. This isn't just a hobby for STEM majors, for engineers. This is a hobby that touches on literally every possible discipline. You like to build things? You have to build things for this hobby. Mechanical engineers have a huge leg up in this hobby because you can't put a giant antenna in the air unless you know how to get it to stay there without the wind blowing it over. And do you like geography? You've got to know geography in this hobby because you're going to be paying a lot of attention to it when you're thinking about signals propagating and trying to figure out where signals are coming from and how far your signal might go or has gone, all of that. You'll start thinking a lot more about where things are on this planet. Geology too, of course, because different types of landforms, different mountains, different shapes of things on the planet affect how radio waves propagate. Not to mention all of the liberal arts, all those humanities. I'm an English major, and I have found endless things to become philosophical about in this hobby. Because this hobby isn't even just one medium of communication, it's multiple different media of communication that all happen to be using radio waves, and all of them can carry different types of messages. And there are just endless ways to study that, both in linguistics, in English, in history. And I could go on for hours and hours until you were sick of hearing me talk about it, of all the ways that this touches on every human endeavor. And so, in the current environment where it seems that we're all worried about being separated from each other, we're worried about a loneliness epidemic, about political polarization, about our inability to connect with each other across different ideological and cultural lines, here we are. We have a hobby that seems to pull everybody together. I mean, this is what hobbies are for, and ham radio is no different that way, in that it pulls people together from all different ideologies, all different walks of life, and we all come together because of just one thing that we all know that we're interested in that maybe not everybody else is. And so maybe that's actually the most important thing about this hobby. Maybe that's the most gratifying thing, more so than the opportunity to learn how technical things work, more so than the fact that you will understand the way that your cell phone and your Wi-Fi and all of this technology around us works better than you ever thought possible is the community aspect of it. It is the people you will meet, the people you will interact with in ways both large and small, in ways both significant and insignificant. From meeting people in person and making new friends to just those little interactions, those times that you choose to go onto single sideband voice and just to hear somebody's accent from all the way across the country. Those little things are some of my favorite things, that we all know the same greetings, we all know how to say hi to each other, we all know these same exchanges, and we're from all over the place. And those moments when you hear that Japanese call sign come through, or where you hear that Australian accent from Australia, or maybe the really rare moments where you hear from somebody from China, or you hear somebody from a country that you honestly hadn't heard of. It's this worldwide community of fantastic people who are all excited and enthusiastic about all the light that we can't see. And I think that's pretty neat. Now let's get out there and let's go play with our radios.